It's a journey, and it's about a mind finding his own spiritualism and his own basis of what makes him think that there may be something else.
When I first spoke with Ridley about it, I said, why? Why make this film? I've seen the Ten Commandments. Isn't that enough? That was before I discovered that there's a wealth more that can be delved into.
If you take on this story, you have to believe it happened. It's almost one of the most powerful anecdotes in the Old Testament.
He's making a movie. He's not trying to read a passage from the Bible for religious purposes.
The sheer scale of it was enormous. It's not just a few extras or even a few big crowd days.
I love anything epic. I love to make up universes and worlds. And I felt, with the greatest respect to previous filmmakers, the Egyptian thing hasn't really been done that well.
I can't think of any other director who can make history come to life in such a personal and real way.
Next to the story of Christ is probably the most important religious story that you can actually tell. I was presented the script by Peter Chernin, and the script told me enough to fully engage me in the story that I really didn't know about. And I was astounded by the lifespan of this particular character and what it led to, which has been represented in many epics over the years. And once I took that on board, I knew I'd be facing that as a challenge as to what I'm going to do with that. I do like a challenge.
Steve Zaillian's take was that this was a story of revolution. And I think naturally, every time you read the Bible, you are reading an interpretation, that is not the original language. What we were aiming for is not a overtly biblical film in the way that people have come to expect biblical films to be. We wanted to find a far more human story and really focusing on the relationship between Moses and Ramesses.
Steve's funny in that whatever you got, he doesn't really want to do it. And so it's a constant persuasion. And I always love the experience because he makes you work every inch of the way through a discussion, page by page, intention. How do we talk about religion? Do I have to talk about God? Steve is not a fantasist, he's a realist, so everything comes from that point of view. The reality of everything is everything, and therefore the logic of that reality is very important to him. And I think that was a perfect choice, because he's saying, well, I'm kind of atheist, really. And I said, well, no better person to write it.
Telling a story like this is tricky, right? It's really tricky because let's start with the character of Moses, the man Moses, the myth, the man, whoever. But Moses as a character in religion and in history belongs to a lot of people. If you get in the business of trying to please everybody, that kind of diffuses your energy.
Is this high tide or low tide?
Doesn't matter.
Huh? I dropped the line. This isn't the Straits, is it?
Fuck. No.
Ah, right. This isn't the Straits, is it?
No.
Sorry, guys.
What's going on?
No.
It started with watching Life of Brian, all right, which you've got to do. I think I watched that like the first evening after speaking with Ridley, because any film, because it's a fantastic film for starters, and I love it, but any film like this where you have earnestness can very easily unintentionally become Life of Brian.
To make him say yes. Yes? Yes! Now shut up that fucking goat!
And I did throughout filming, I always had like, you know, he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy, always going through my head, and always look on the bright side of life. Like it was always, I had to kind of stop myself from humming it in scenes sometimes. That and Mel Brooks' History of the World, you know, he comes down with the 15 commandments and then drops one and becomes 10.
Has given unto you these 15.
Wait.
10 commandments for all to obey.
And then, all right, okay, that's what we have to figure out. Don't become that. Then I set about reading the Torah, which took a little while, but really fascinating. You know, I was really fascinated by it. There's a series of books called Legends of the Jews. There's a book called Moses a Life by Jonathan Kirsch, which I found to be really helpful in looking at him as a all too human man. And then conversations, with various religious people and their takes and their thoughts, and also witnessing how each and every person has their own personal idea of who Moses should be. And each person, they would talk with me, and there was no question that I had to play it the way that they saw it. And so understanding, right, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't be everybody's image. And so we have to free ourselves up and give our own interpretation, which was always what, Steve, Salian and Ridley, were going to do.
I got a lot of information from people who knew the Old Testament inside out, particularly Christian Bale, who is actually an absolute researcher of what he's about to do. I'll do a lot of work with the writers, and every time I do an evolution with a writer, I get in even deeper to what I'm doing, because at the same time, I'm evolving on the art direction front and constant research, seeing pictures, seeing wardrobe, seeing costumes, seeing weapons, and usually digging into artwork that you never see normally.
One of the things I loved about the script is it seems so immediate, so modern, and these sort of war rooms and everything. You tell yourself it's about fighting the Hittites or the Assyrians, but it just feels like it's happening today.
We seem to have right now a taste for the first stories, or a sense of where we've come from, or a need for a sense of where we've come from. And the epic form seems to be, right now, something that people desire.
It's just so beautifully written. The dialogue, it's just, it sends chills up and down my spine, because it's so, Moses and Ramses, the way their characters talk is so unique to them and very elegant.
The story of Moses is one of incredible effort against all conceivable possible odds. And because of that, the screenplay is kind of milestone with very emotional islands. That's part of the story, part of the structure, and it's down to the actors, and particularly Christian, as to how that lands. How do I acknowledge or honor the story and the belief? And you have to honor that. You have to say you can't say it's all rubbish. There's something in there that made sense and I know it's passed down and passed down and passed down, but usually it goes back to the basics, which fundamentally, the fundamentals are probably basically true.
It's completely debatable, I mean, you got Freud, he thought, he claimed that there were two men who were Moses, that the first one was killed by his followers. They got unhappy with him, and he got another, and they got another Moses in. It seems like the trend right now is to say he probably didn't exist. And archaeological evidence suggests unlikely.
He was a very important Egyptian noble, Prince of Egypt, you could call him. He would never be on the throne. and was purported to have a close relationship with Ramses. And so they were real people. And also he was a very good military man, general, commander. And then his secret unearthed itself, and from that evolved into his journey, his life-changing spiritual journey into where he would find and identify what we recognize as the first and the real God.
To me, regardless of the historical veracity of him, he's an incredibly important man, whether that's symbolically or actually, in that, Judaism and Islam and Christianity view him as one of the most important prophets and the most important prophet. So there's been such a phenomenal influence that he's had upon civilization and religion.
Moses has always been like this guy who's, hard to reach, a person who came to it in a way that there's an enlightenment that, happens to the guy, but he always seems as if as a character, not easy to understand.
I chose to believe that he was disdainful of 1,000 gods. How is that feasible? How is that possible? You can, kill a goose and pray you're going to have good corn next year, but that's not really practical. And yet at the same time, if you're dealing with a different kind of God where there are no rewards other than the fact that you believe in him, and therefore you can't expect a tit for tat. I believe, so I'll be rewarded. Whereas the more pagan gods would believe, I believe, I will sacrifice, then I will be rewarded. This God's much tougher than that. He's not going to give you any rewards if he chooses not to. Otherwise, why would he let such terrible things happen?
It's ultimately a tale of good over evil. It's a relationship. You identify with a man who, against everything, achieves the unthinkable, to take 400,000 people away from a despotic ruler at a time when there was no real power to challenge that person. He did it without force, but with the help of phenomena, be they miracles from God or phenomena that we can't explain.
That's always one of the biggest problems of the story, is that it's not Moses doing, it's not Ramses doing. But Ramses, we've got him believing it is Moses doing, and his God. And that's where we go into the biblical idea that he talks about killing sheep and putting blood around windows and apertures, which is the only piece of real magic in parentheses that I use in the film, because everything else is reality, flies, red clay dissolving in water, look like blood, frogs coming out the water because they're escaping from the pollution, dead fish dying from the clay, a sudden plague of locusts that's come in, actually decimate everything, leaving the people at the edge of starvation.
Miracles can occur, and you can actually lock them down scientifically sometimes, but you can't always. I mean, this film to some extent explores that. What are the sort of planetary weather systems that actually would affect things like the sea parting?
Even the parting of the Red Sea, how that could have happened actually in nature and then been over the centuries, become a myth that we actually get to explore and see how it would work.
I read historically, and I don't know how the hell they know this, but they seem to know everything today, that 3,000 years ago, there was a major earthquake in the sea underneath the foot of Italy, which is more or less right opposite the Nile, several hundred miles out, but right there, which probably created a tidal wave that we cannot conceive of, but it's probably at least 200 feet high. And I thought that was interesting because the beginning of the movement would probably create a massive drain where you'd stand there and step into the sea and wonder why it's moving so quickly. If you fell into the water, you get swept away.
It's, I think, so compelling in its investigation of how to lead and what is a leader and what is power and how to use it, and the sort of blindness and deafness that comes with great power. So all these very timely themes, and then these incredible myths to explore with all of what we can do now.
It has a revolutionary bent to it. It feels very of the moment. Politically, it feels very of the moment too.
We're in this incredible backdrop with gods and, pharaoh dogs and cheetahs running around, and these people are larger than life, and yet the script is very intimate. So that's, I think, the challenge and deliciousness of it, is to do both.
The story of Moses is the forerunner of everything, and also the formation of the idea of universal social order, which everything needed, desperately needed, but you're still centuries off it. And that's why you get the book, the Ten Commandments, the rules of living together are this, bang.
The scale of the sets was bigger than any other sets we've ever done. And as big as we can build, it's never big enough for Ridley.
The idea of building the environment is always attractive. My art department, I think, is probably the best in the world. And I get books and stuff coming in front of me, it's all there. It's wow, I want that, I want that, I want that. And how do we do that? And how do we afford that? How do we afford to put this massive jigsaw into this budget?
Every movie is a prototype, and usually he leads us in a direction that most of us would never considered.
There's no existing sets that I can shoot on, like there's no existing costume or wardrobe I can shoot on that I can rent. You can't rent an Egyptian pharaoh's costume. You can't rent an Egyptian sword. You got to make everything. So that then falls into the Gianti's department and the armorers and all that. Everything's made. So it's always a very exciting time for me when I'm prepping this. I'm still kind of fundamentally an art director at heart, and I really love the process of creating evolving the universes of each film. Here he is standing there with the babe, okay, like this. There's your columns, right? Right?
Yes.
There's the back view, I think, which is really good. This will come into it, because they're huge, aren't they? The Joss's ice cricket balls hitting and bouncing, okay? So where do you do that? Do you do that there, or should we do it here?
This is just a schedule of sculptures that we have.
We immediately got together with Arthur Max, the production designer, and sat down, roughing out sort of planning how we'd do it, where we might do it, how to get it going.
This is the way that we approach the movie. Visually, it's a kind of graphic storyboard, which we started doing on The Counselor. So this is just the two major journeys, which involve, quite a number of different locations, going from mountainous terrain to desert dunes to ocean beaches and back again.
We get the best of the digital artists, and the digital artists literally will, I'll do my sketch and thumbnail thing, I thought like this and that. So it's the drawing specific, and they go, yeah, and then we talk about that, then the digital artist will take it on board and then redraw it pretty well to plan, and it'll end up looking like a photograph this big, a glossy photograph of a room or a space.
We work together with Ridley in a very tight-knit little unit. There's a few of us who've been collaborating with him for quite a long time. Myself, Janty Yates, costume designer, Darius Wolski, he's done a few with Ridley. A lot of the integration of ideas comes from those meetings, sitting in a room.
These are great, aren't they? You know what? I think the girls and the gold is great. I'm not sure about the fabric. Fabric sometimes looks modern. I don't know why. The hair's fighting the wardrobe. These are great. There's actually quite a lot of pretty magnificent art on Egypt from the late 19th century. romantic painters. There's some huge paintings done in the British Museum, which are, I'd go and look at them.
We particularly like Lawrence Alma-Tadema, who painted not as many as he did Roman scenes, but quite a few Egyptian interiors, which we used as a basic iconography.
With the art side, to me, is also a massive character. The proscenium is a character. And, you know, when the proscenium is bigger than the actor, then the proscenium is the most important thing in frame. When it's the other way around, then it's all about the actor. So in this instance, the architecture is very real and stunning, but it shows the power and crazy egomania of the Egyptians to put up the Pi-Ramses statue was 200 feet high.
We had some of the bigger stages at Pinewood, and the design process lasted about 8 weeks and the construction only 10. So it was very compressed.
We've been producing on the stages for around about 10 weeks now. We've been manufacturing the sets. In all, I suppose, from drafting side, they've been on the go for about 6 months now. The morale is good. We're up against it. We're into the last few days before shooting, so everybody's running around and trying to get it all completed on time, which we will be. We'll be there on time.
The height of the build in the UK, we had probably 150 people, I think, in all departments: sculptors, painters, carpenters, plasterers, model makers. Not to mention the set dressing and prop departments, probably another 75 people.
All of these chariots are all built in the UK, in Pinewood, in a workshop that we set up. Effects built the effects rigs and some of the stunt-bodied ones, and we built the main action picture vehicle chariots. A British crew of about 25 people, all skilled, you know, from metal fabricators to prop makers to leather workers to painters, all done beautiful work.
You can't build every set the way you want it, and you'll just be out of sight, the rising cost. So what's helped us today is a marvelous evolved technology in digital sampling, texturing, coloring, lighting, perspective. So if I'm going to put in a massive column, like this column could be like the size of the columns at the Pantheon, which I don't know, they're 60 feet high, and the bottom of the column is like 3 meters across. I only build the first 12 feet. The rest is just put in. You preconceive digitally, so you know exactly what you're going to get, and these preconceptions are architecturally and perspectively and scale-wise perfect. They're perfect architectural renditions. That's what you're going to get. And it's worked against me a bit because I really like to build the set and light it and move the actors through it. Now I've got to miniaturize, bring things down, only build a certain amount, so it's kind of frustrating. But I trust, I've now had enough digital experience to trust that the end result I'll get will be perfect.
We started off with stage sets, elaborate stage sets with all the interiors of both Memphis and the city of Pi-Ramses, with a lot of detail, a lot of lush palaces, royal bedrooms, council rooms, government interiors for the Egyptians, and also interiors of the Hebrew scholars' dwellings and hovels, where we meet some of the family of Moses living in the ghetto. However elaborate the interiors of an Egyptian palace were, the only information we had to go on was what we gleaned from a couple of tombs that were found intact, which were either in the British Museum or the Cairo Museum, which we had access to. And the cost of doing that was one of the biggest costs of the set dressing, because we had to design make and decorate every stick of furniture, every glass bowl and jar, every light fixture. There were only a few pieces that we could rent for hire that had been used on previous Egyptian productions. But there wasn't enough to decorate so many palaces and chambers, and I think we did 3 or 4 beds, probably a dozen or 20 or more tables, probably 30 chairs, a couple of thrones. Every knife, cup, tankard, beaker, candle, fabric was custom made for the film. And then also the iconography, the wall decorations, murals, hieroglyphic carvings, statuary. I mean, it can go on and on with the scale of these things. Some of the statuary we only built 25, 30 foot high, a pair of feet. This is terrific here.
Okay. You like that?
Yeah, that's going to read. But once in a while, do a bigger chunk because of the scale of this thing. You see the round ears? Maybe take a chunk out of one of the ears.
Okay.
From the back, it looks a little bit perfect.
The 2 palaces that exist in the film all had to be done here in the UK. And that had a massive challenge for the art department and construction and set deck, because cost-wise, you want to use the same walls. You want to use the same columns. You need to use the same sets. We only had 4.5 weeks to do a third of the film.
The Lego process became logical when you budget. You've got to keep your budget tight on big films. I discovered that I could reutilize a space or a room by keeping some of the walls and columns and major pieces of scenery on wheels, fundamentally. So I'd finish a room, then say, right, that's going to go with that. And you move the Lego around, change the shape of the room, bit of decoration, change the furniture, and you've got another set. Woo! Now the next one. Go on, Billy, on the double.
Quicker, Billy.
Various,
Billy. Me, Billy. That's it. Now the next one. There you go.
Yeah. It's a matter of inches. The palette of the Palace of Memphis is very different to the tones of Paramses and Ramses' new city. And we're very conscious of all that, and almost like decorating a home.
This is a low-res model of Pyramses, the city. But all of this will be CG. A little bit that you'll see just there is part of the set that we're building in Spain.
The first thing we started with was the giant Paramses build site, which is our biggest physical set. And we did a lot of digital drawing for those, which eventually led to a 3D animation flyover, so we could give Ridley and the studio an idea of the scale. It was a very useful tool to separate what was going to be a physical build and what was going to be extension.
The Almeria side of it was a massive set. It was there for quite a long time, where I'm building all the exteriors of Memphis first and then Paramses. And I shot 2 ends of the set, and we built the roads, scraped the roads in, but this is not set designed by nails and hammers. This is like bulldozers, concrete mixers and things like that.
Here in Spain, in Almeria, we're sitting on pretty much a backlot set, a composite of both Memphis and City of Pyramses exteriors, which is 1.5 kilometers long by 1 kilometer wide, including all the mountain ranges and fields you see around me. We're using almost every corner of it for the movie. The topography is very user-friendly here, so that we can do a gigantic temple set less than 1 kilometer away from what is a small village square, across from a very big main street, across from a building site under construction, and brick fields and a villa, all within range of each other, which makes it kind of a gigantic backlot. This is our prime avenue, the Avenue of Palms. This is the ghetto where the slaves are kept, for which we've built a gate, partial walls, and the beginnings of the temple, and a digital beginning of Ramses' pyramid, the quarry, which is where all this smoke is rising out of the earth from.
We'd found this old road of palm trees which looked pretty bedraggled and dying in the middle of this scraggy bit of desert just outside of Almeria.
We had to freshen that up and make that look a very smart avenue, as if it was going to a palace. To do that, we had to replant around 60 new palm trees. They're all about 5 to 6 meters tall, have to be dug into about 1.5 meters, a watering system put in to keep those alive, and then the landscape recontoured to the requirements of the set.
In that you put down the footings of the big intended buildings and temples and pyramids, and the footings you'll put in maybe 10, 15 feet high, then it'll be finished off digitally.
The Nile will be probably done by doing aerial plates of the actual Nile and dropping them into the background. Where all that sea of plastic greenhouses are now will be the Nile, lush fields, palm trees lining the riverside, boats, boat basins, other buildings, temple complexes leading to the river, the whole gamut of ancient Egypt and its gigantic culture. The statue behind me is a 10-story building. That's the scale of that head, which goes on top of a full standing figure, which is 200 feet high, so that's a 20-story building. We decided to build the head you see behind me because we can interact with it physically, and we have quite a few scenes passing it, both day and night, 9 years before, 9 years later. So it seemed an iconic element, which we can then, once we tear down the scaffolding, scan yet again and include in our digital model of the 200-foot high statue with our 30-foot feet.
I just built the first 30 feet of his legs, but these massive feet. And then on the edge of that town, surrounding the town, would be the ghetto of the slaves or the Hebrews who lived in close proximity just outside the wall.
Most of the rocks you see around us are all modern day, lightweight materials, spray-on foam and concrete and fiberglass and modern materials. But we also, do things in the traditional ways. There's about 10,000 real adobe bricks that were handmade.
The Spaniards are very, very good artisans, craftsmen, fantastic craftsmen. Any other country in the world, I wouldn't have got that set up in the time. We got that up in a ridiculously short space of time. From the minute I got a green light, we were up and running within about 10 weeks. Insane. Normally it'd take like 5 months. But we just knew we had to get it up, and it got thrown up and then refined.
It's the biggest set I've ever built in the shortest amount of time. And so we have about 3 weeks left. And we're all hell for leather, trying to finish. It's a real challenge for everybody. There's an amazing international collaborative team of British, Welsh, Scottish, Irish collaborators, and Spanish as well. There's some Italians. So it's a multinational collaborative team. They're working very well. I'm really proud of them. And let's hope they finish it in time.
When you're planning, how do I do the parting of the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, I tend to look for something that had occurred. So tsunami is a good idea, about draining out tsunami, because it needs to be big enough to be really big and scary, but not too big where it becomes fantasy.
Started off with Ridley, sat down over a weekend, and he storyboarded the whole sequence out. So he just Ridley does these storyboards, which are You know, you'd think the man was a professional storyboard artist. But he storyboards, comes in, discusses it, starts with Arthur, and then again we involve visual effects. So he kind of refines the storyboards probably through maybe a second or third phase of boards, and then we handed those boards over to the visual effects department, who then previs them.
The digital previs came from the drawings of what happens from the pulling back of the sea, the walk, then realizing the Egyptians were there, then the panic and the run, and then the Egyptians coming across after them, and then his small army, which was apparently there was an army of about 300, turned around to face the Egyptians coming at them. That's when you get the wave coming back in, and how do I stretch that particular time of a wave that's probably coming at, like, I would think a minimum of 120 miles an hour, and it's a wall of maybe 200 feet. That's a lot of water coming at you. And I don't want to be over in a heartbeat because I've got various things that have got to happen, dramatized. Once it previs, then you can dramatically start to see what's going to happen when you shoot it like that. And I think you've literally just got to believe by then the previs and commit to your drawing and previs as to what it's going to be, and then it's massage in the editing room.
That is another very essential use of digital previs, because it's such a big sequence and there's so many elements that are digital integrated with location shooting.
I really like creating the universe. That's why I like science fiction or period. Creating the universe, you really feel you're really working.
It's really almost like sitting around a master in a studio like they used to do in the Renaissance. And we're his Gulov, Ridley Scott. And we're here to implement his vision.
Demo, lots of heavy mist.
The challenge of that and the real pleasure of that is what keeps me going. Because you never know what you're going to be doing next. And when you think you've had a good idea, he'll embrace it and turn it around and make it even better. Make it larger and I think a little more idiosyncratic.
To pass through that time travel door and doing what I do, I really like to do that. And storyboard takes me right in to making decisions within the film, but really quite subtle. It's a bit like thinking about what lines are going to happen next. I board and work in the same way. So you get that board will sometimes create notes, so the notes will go back to the writer saying, what if this and that happens? Oh, that's a good idea, because I'll try and incorporate that. So it's like taking yourself into the zone. Casting is incredibly important. So when I cast, you will always regret it if you weren't paying attention. So even right down to the smallest part is very, very important.
I laughed when he first told me about it. I said, well, Moses, you mean, what, like with the hair and the sandals and the sand and like Moses? Yep. Okay, all right, you know, that seemed like a ridiculous challenge, and I love ridiculous challenges.
Bring her in. Now!
You look for just human qualities in any character, however they're dressed, no matter what the backdrop is, whether you're in space, whether you're in Egypt.
Coming in, Rin. Oh, really? Who are you eating? Right in there, sir.
I met with Christian 4 years ago, who said to me, I thought we had a cup of coffee, and should we not do something? I said, yeah, right. And we had a very good meeting, and then nothing happened for 4 years, and I think he really thought I'd forgotten. I was trying to avoid him. And then I just called him up one day and said, I've got this thing for you. I think this is for you.
We'd talked for a while about working together, and it became more attractive to me the more I knew. I'm not religious, and I didn't know an awful lot beyond Charlton Heston. as Moses. And the more I read, the more intrigued I became at the potential. And, I know no one would ever go to see it, but, this could be an 8-hour-long film if you really wanted to include everything that happened. And to me, it only gets more and more fascinating as it goes on.
Christian does all the research he needs to do on every form. I think he read the Old Testament and the New Testament 4 times. And he brings all of that to bear in some very interesting details and anecdotes about this and that. And frequently that stuff sticks and is usable and useful. But by doing that, he's actually literally building himself up as his own character. And it was some stuff you won't use, but it's inside him. So I expected a lot. I got way more.
I came here to tell you that something is coming that I have no control of, something that will affect thousands.
Christian brings, apart from an incredible instinct as an actor and an ability to transform and to really not just wear a costume, but deeply, I think, inhabit the parts that he plays in a way that goes a little further than a lot of people ever have access to.
Do not smile.
Liberties! Do not smile!
Sometimes what you're staring at is, in fact, a passionate leader.
This way!
You described it as being a bit of a fundamentalist, which of course he was to the Egyptians. Who is this loony who's actually coming in to turn us upside down? And he gets right inside of that. It's very impressive.
Moses has 3 acts, really. The first act, he is a member of the palace. He's, the brother that Ramses never had, but he's very much part of the palace setup. And so Ridley wanted him quite discreet. He's a military man, so he has sober tones.
Janti's wonderful, she's a really great spirit. You have lots of cups of tea when Janti's about, and she did this, wonderful job. And we had some hilarious fittings early on because we said, let's just try everything, let's give it a shot. And so some of it looked absolutely ridiculous. And likewise with hair. You often go through these extravagant ideas and outlandish notions before you come back to something much more simple.
The blue fabric's good under the helmet. It's really the French Foreign Legion, keep the sun off your neck, so it's practical, completely practical.
He has his Midian village look, which is basically shepherd. And then the third act is when he becomes the renegade. And he's very much, he's stolen palace guard armor, but he's very much living in the mountains. Christian's reaction to the look that Ridley decided on for Moses was absolutely 150% behind it. He didn't want anything flamboyant for his character at all.
I remember I was sitting on Bondi Beach and kind of had a little bit of time ahead of me where I didn't know what the future held for a moment, which was nice. And then I got a phone call basically, and within 48 hours I was in London trying on probably about 30 gold skirts and shaving my head and wearing eyeliner and wearing all this gold jewelry. It was like the opposite in every way from where I'd been 48 hours earlier.
So looking down the lens, please, Joel. Thank you.
And now turn the light on, guys.
Twinkle.
It's good, great, beautiful.
All I wanted to do was to have him make me feel like on the outside I could sell this thing, because then I could go about selling it from the inside. And Ridley and his team dressed me up and made me up and took all my hair off, and I started to really see the possibility of it. I was excited to get a chance to work with Ridley and to feel safe doing it in such a big way, in such an unusual context for me.
Joel, he brought to this a flair of athleticism, intellectual, very brooding, and very warm as well. So he's got a lot of things going for him in terms of putting across his brotherhood with Moses and his respect and affection and envy of Moses. So envy is poison.
Now you think that invoking him entitles you to something. Quite the opposite! I am the god! I am the god!
These stories are big. They're Shakespearean in their nature. The characters somehow feel archetypal. You meet Ramses, you kind of get him straight away. It helps, I think, because an audience is looking at a new world or a new period or a time, that it's nice sometimes when you're watching a story like this to be able to reach out and straight away understand a character.
Joel is great because I think he's very amenable and has a sense of intellectual. At the same time, he's very physical and so there's a real sense of real violence if you want it. And this kind of look. Put the old Cole on, suddenly he's Egyptian.
I felt like he had the hardest part in the film, and he just owned it from day one. I was very impressed, and really manages to capture all of the arrogance of someone with limitless power, but all of the insecurities and absolute trivial nature of somebody who desperately wants to hold on to their leadership.
The joke became, for Ramses, was, have you got this in gold? You know, because basically everything that I wear is gold. Everything that I have is gold.
He was quite flamboyant. We know this from our research, Ramses. And he was quite arrogant. He's had the most statues built to himself than anyone else. So we were able to just over-exaggerate slightly. So everything he has is he has the most beautiful jewelry. Actually, his armor is completely gold, gilded. His helmet is gold. And he, of course, wears gold wrist cuffs, gold armbands, gold necklace, collar.
The Egyptians were really kind of absolute bizarre choices which just work, you know? Men wore kohl, which is black eye makeup, because that was their affectation in those days.
I did a lot of research of what they used. They used a lot of black kohl eyeliner. They used the malachite greeny blue color. We used a lot of that. They used a lot of gold.
There are in existence kind of early panels and paintings and things like that, and the hieroglyphics. If you look carefully, it's fairly consistent how the makeup is, and clearly it's made up. It's not a representation of just an eye. There's a kind of makeup to it.
If for any reason you ever forget that, let these remind you. Long enough to be effective from horseback, not so long that you trip over them. I grew up on a lot of these like biblical films, you know. When I was a kid, that was the thing they were being made at that time a lot. And so obviously the Ten Commandments, I saw many times, and Ben-Hur and Spartacus. It's kind of strange being in one of them because no matter how old you are, you know, you go, oh wow, gonna be in one of these movies because it's part of my childhood. You know, I mean, I had these swords and I had all these things, and we would reenact these movies when we were kids. I mean, my friend had a little farm, and we used to, actually, I didn't tell this to Ridley, but, you know, we used to do like the Ten Commandments, and people would there'd be Joshua or Moses or Ramses, and he had tomato fields, and we would use that as the Red Sea.
I like going with people who haven't done it before, and I like to shock by casting people so people say, who's that? Oh my God, that's John Turturro. I love to do that, particularly when they're really working, they're pulling it off. So you're getting a character who's usefully, from the commercial aspect of the film, because it's a very nice part to have these kind of weight of actors as part of the ensemble, but at the same time, because they're not used to playing this kind of role, it's a surprise piece of casting, which also makes it fresh.
Information is everything. But not if it's wrong. What I don't want to do and won't do is sit and wait until we're fighting Hittite armies outside the palace walls. He asked me, there was a couple parts, and I thought this part seemed to be interesting, even though maybe I was a little young for it. But people didn't live that long in those days. And actually, when you look at the mummified version of Seti, and it's hard to tell how old he was.
I have endured worse than this.
Oh, it's not about you. It's about me.
If you're not king, I am just another dowager, and you're less than that.
The wife of Seti, the mother of Ramses, is Sigoni Weaver, is Tuya, who again existed as the favorite wife of Seti.
I spent all of 4th grade studying Egypt, and so for me to be playing an Egyptian queen, especially during, I guess it's called the New Kingdom, you just can't believe.
Sigoni knew this was happening and said, I would be a very good queen. And I said, you absolutely would. So that's how it happened. Now, I get on so well with her. She's so much fun and so talented and so statuesque. She's very impressive, quite imposing.
Seti never asked her to sort of rule with him, and I think she has a great deal of ability, and I think she feels very underused, and so I think she's hoping that Ramesses will use her more. I mean, I think she'd like to be sort of the Henry Kissinger of the pharaoh's administration, and it's quite hurtful and disappointing to her that he doesn't listen to her. Of course, the terrible thing about Tuya is she's so right.
She didn't want to play it quite so Lady Macbeth and so dark, and I went along with that because there's not enough there in the number of scenes to enable you to really explore the complexity of a person who is both benign but at the same time deadly. She's pretty well on track pretty well all the time in terms of saying, get rid of this person.
You're putting the man you've been told will replace you next to you?
Queen Tuya, Sigourney Weaver's character, is very flamboyant and very sexy. She thinks she's going to be queen when Ramses reaches the throne.
So astonishing to put on these costumes and have this beautiful makeup and these extraordinary wigs. I've never been in a picture where I felt so utterly transformed. Janty Yates, I think, is a genius. I think my costumes are breathtaking. The jewelry, everything. And then Nana, who does the wigs and the headpieces. It's just, everyone, I think, has worked with Ridley numerous times before, and, I think a lot gets thrown at them, and they just juggle, and they make it work, and everyone looks glorious to me.
I'm glad to see you. I didn't think I would. But I have to ask. Why are you here?
Sir Ben, I've always wanted to work with, and, the occasion never arose, and Ben is an effortless, great partner in doing the job. He is so clever and adept and chameleonish.
Rather than be waiting for permission to speak, I'd just like to admire him for a little while. Just admire him.
I thought he was going to be really tough, and he wasn't. So I want to work with him again. He was really terrific. He is both strong and benign at the same time. He's a real tough guy. But at the same time, there's an iron cast centerpiece to him that is immovable. And that's what I wanted. I want the guy who's fundamentally the leader of the Hebrews. In essence, the leader. He's not a person who walks out front riding a horse with a staff and all that kind of thing, but just the wise man, the wisest of all men. Aaron Paul was, again, somebody knew it was happening. I knew him well, but he'd done Breaking Bad, and I knew I'm an avid fan of Breaking Bad, and I never thought of him, honestly, of him doing that. And somebody said, Aaron would really like to do a part in the film. He's identified Joshua, and I said, really? It's not a lot there. So I had a chat with him and said, there's not a lot, yeah. And he said, I don't care, I just want to do it. He said, I've got a good feeling about this. I'd like to do it. I said, well, that's cool, but when you're saying long sandals and wardrobe and shit on the mountain range, don't ask me for more lines, okay? Because that's what it is. And he made said, absolutely not. He made the most of everything. He's a great, patient team player and sits and waits for something for it to happen, and he'll come and he'll get engaged in an effortless manner. I was really impressed.
Nothing's ever easy when you have to build from scratch, because you can't go down the Egypt shop and rent something, because I think the last costumes that we found in costume houses was sort of kind of for Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra. But as Joel says, as long as it's in gold.
Janti will say, when are we starting? And then she'll just submit within about 10 days. I'll end up with a library of books in the office in London where she'll be going, this, that, and she'll go through it and she'll have it all marked up, saying, what about that, what about that, what about that?
Research, and then more research. I would research at night, at the weekends. Again, it's a bit like that gourmet feast. You just can't get enough. You're completely obsessed. We go into prototyping. And that is where you find out really how difficult everything is to make. And you also, you will find that you're going, on this, for example, we were going too operatic. It was too Aida, as what Ridley said. And so, we toned a lot back, we toned a lot down.
Once you get down what they were believed to dress like, and you look at it and go, Jesus, that's going to apply to Christian Bale wearing that or Ramses wearing that, it's going to be tricky. So you've always got to adjust it for the person. But was it blingy? Absolutely. But actually beautiful.
It's coming from Egyptian paintings and stuff like that. Everything is so simple because it's cotton and what the imagination we have from royalty is always, the 19th century royalty and big skirts. But these are really, maybe modest even, and they are really comfortable and the material are really amazing.
He's fortunate to have you. This is what I said. Miriam, by my definition of a servant, she's incredibly glamorous. But by the Egyptian definition, she's not. She's only got 5 gold rings. If you put on these costumes and put on this hair and have this extraordinary makeup and just be there, most of your work is done.
The jewellery is the most phenomenal and extraordinarily detailed and intricate, glorious and wonderful skill that the Egyptians had. Their enamelling, everything was gold, everything was enamelled. Their depictions of animals, their depictions of their gods, just phenomenal, and it's all there for us.
When I first turned up and I was trying on costumes and then doing a bit of hair when those things were separate and I put the costumes on, I just felt like that guy at the office who decided to go to the Halloween party dressed as an Egyptian pharaoh. But putting it all together as one package and then walking onto these incredible sets. And this speaks in a larger sense to my whole love of filmmaking, is you get all these amazing people who are separately excellent at the thing that they do, designers, costume sets, all that stuff, and then the camera team. You put it all together, and that gives power to a person like me. Because without all that stuff, I'm kind of waiting around in my own mind, and it doesn't feel right. So the power comes from the collection of all the brains and their skill.
It's just sheer artistry. My departments are probably the best. And the sheer experience behind how they're going to do it is really genius.
started the film on stage in London, which is the reverse way of doing it. You normally leave the stage to the end. You get the bigger sequences out of the way, and you come crying back to the home stage.
I can't rent or find an Egyptian interior on location, so I have to do it there.
When a director is that driven and that demanding, it's inspirational because you just go, we can do this.
Pinewood, England, is probably one of the best places in the world right now for scenic building, construction. They're the best. Pinewood was, funny enough, the smallest bite of the film, but was essential because we were building all the hard scenery of the interiors. So I was in Pinewood a relatively short space of time before we went to on location.
It is so busy at the moment in the industry. We actually had to take advantage of another film delaying their dates to get any stage space whatsoever in the UK.
I think part of it's been to do with a very useful tax rebate, which has given them a lot of work. All the studios are jammed solid and have been for a number of years now. By doing that, it means your units, let's say, are getting lots of practice, so they are improving.
Action.
Every day on this has been challenging, and rightly so, because you're making an epic. But I like a challenging first week. It's a great way of bonding the crew.
3, 2, and action!
I think it's good to have something that everybody can get into, really get their teeth into, show what they're about, go to market with their experience and their creativity, their storytelling. That's what we're doing, telling stories. We're entertaining people. And you've got a fantastic group of people to do that, and it's great to just unite them in one common factor. I don't think there's any industry really that unites such a wide, diverse group of people in one single purpose.
Deep camera.
There's a scene with a snake pit. Ramses was curious and fond of snakes, and so there's a scene with a snake pit where they're all in there. They're all albino. There's a big albino python. Beautiful, beautiful thing, just ivory color. So you'll be doing this and that, and the snake will be doing that.
Yeah.
And then you come forward, and then you go wham. That was one corner of his throne room. Then when that was done, we moved the things out, took some drapes down, turned it into his throne room.
Put it there.
Can't reverse prophecy.
Yes, you can. You can kill him. Kill him.
Then that was dismantled, readjusted, and made into the bedroom, and so on and so forth. So I've got 15 columns, massive columns. Then wheel them into it and make a corridor of them just going down one side with the wall on the other. So it's a bargain basement way of doing big sets.
The challenge in the studio is being able to turn around everything. No time to turn it around. Often night swing gangs working through the night. Lots of Ridley being incredibly creative when he was saying, well, listen, I can shoot that way for this scene and we'll just redress that way, lose that column, bring in a drape, bring in a table, and you've got something completely different. His ability to remaster and recreate the same piece of scenery is phenomenal.
I always find it tough filming in studios because it was very funny when we were filming at Pinewood, because it was like those films where you think that can't really ever happen, where somebody's walking at lunchtime and you've got cowboys and then you've got an Egyptian person and then clowns going across.
Release.
I find it really difficult to get into something when it's so clear that you're making a film. And almost it's too perfect, because you can get rid of all sound that you don't want. Everything is perfect, and life is never perfect like that. So I always feel like I'm doing an awful job whenever I work in a studio. The sets were phenomenal, enormous, and they were incredible.
You walk into these sets, which are actually very elegantly and economically done with firelight and, gods and scrims and things like that. And the lighting is so beautiful. When I look across the stage and see Ridley, it feels like no time has passed at all. And I still see this brilliant man who's, every day is Christmas Day when he's on a set. And he's so in command of how to make his vision come into the film. And he was already like that in Alien. We didn't rehearse, and a lot of improvisation, which we're not doing in this film, but he has such an ear for reality and for honesty in the performances.
Probably the toughest thing for me in the movie was finding my feet, really, feeling comfortable being this guy in this story. And when I come to work, I really need to know that I belong here. And so when it's quite frightening when you turn up and you think, I don't really belong yet. And I remember early on having to physically rehearse a scene with Ridley and Christian. I've found out that Moses is more than likely Hebrew, and I'm questioning him about it. And it results in me wanting to test Miriam and Moses by threatening to cut her arm off. Big dramatic scene. And I was so scared because I've never felt like I belonged yet. And there I was rehearsing this scene, and I felt terrible. And I remember thinking, poor Ridley, like he's brought me all the way here, and I've let him down. But the survivor in me was like, okay, that's a rehearsal. We've got 2 weeks before we start shooting. I've got that amount of time to feel like I belong. And so, strangely enough, one of the favourite parts of the shoot for me was finally shooting that scene.
How do you know Moses?
You know how I know him.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you again, and if the answer is again no, I apologise for what I've said.
Stop this, stop this, stop this!
I want to know the truth! I want to know the truth!
It had become part of me, or, that I was part of that gold skirt. The gold skirt was me, and I was the gold skirt, and it was okay. Sometimes I often think that the worst thing is also the best thing, and that scene, it had been the worst, and it somehow became the best.
To help you as an actor, you couldn't ask for more. I mean, everywhere you look, the level of detail, it's exquisite. I look around and it feels like, I'm in a painting.
I think the better the proscenium, it affects the actor definitely. When the actor walks on, sees a great set, he'll be completely taken. It'll adjust him. And same with good wardrobe. Wardrobe is very important for the actor to walk on with the stuff that really works on him and looks right on him. It's going to make him feel and behave differently.
If he hadn't been dying himself. And what do? My precious nephew, on the advice of my precious sister-in-law.
When I read the script, I thought it's a great script, very well written, and I was really wondering to see what Ridley would get out of it and how he would do it, until I got here and I started discovering how huge this production is, for everybody. Even in the preparation, I mean, it was, for me, every time I was meeting someone, I was meeting like a whole school of cinema.
Ramesses. Don't be stupid!
I'm not talking to you.
And I was just saying, wow, this is going to be really fun. And still, it's exactly like the scenes I've read. You don't have the whole thing really right in your mind until you're here and you're on the spot, you're in the space, you're on set, and you're just like in the atmosphere of that kingdom in a way.
Thank you.
159, take 1A camera. 48 frames.
Alright, go, go, go! Top left, top left. Top left. Go up, go up. Cut it, cut it!
We need to make sure we're running all the way to the back. At that point, some people were just literally at the front and nobody was going further back.
If you come in without a basket or a bag, why don't you try taking it off the person next to you? That's fine. Fight over it.
Why are you wedging the grain down, sir?
So when we do the gas explosion, really, we don't blow up the whole sets with the real grain that we're using.
And how would that blow up? Is it the dust in the air?
It's the dust in the air that could ignite.
3, 2, 1, action! Fire! 1, go!
Out!
By the time we'd finished that first third of the shoot, we had completed a large percentage of the drama. All interior palace, stables, bedrooms, hallways, interior stuff of the plagues. Anything that centered around the Egyptian court, all that stuff was Pinewood. A little bit of exterior chariot riding up to the gates of the palace or the entrances to the palaces.
Action, action.
We've got a full complement of an Egyptian army coming in, and so for the first time we've got the chariots and all the horse outfits and all the cavalry coming in with all their flags. So this is basically the litmus test of whether we've managed to sort of get it together.
On this table here, I'd like royal family, musicians, Memphis court, any aides, scribes, handmaids on this table all the way down, and present guard, palace guards.
Great, Russell, if you just pop all your stuff into that bag and then follow Jackie into that changing room,
Okay,
she's going to give you your costume.
We're on the paddock lot at Pinewood, so we brought in 250 crowd. We've got our biggest set here at Pinewood. We brought in 92 horses, 60 stuntmen, 40 riders, and we basically did the sort of leaving for the Battle of Kadesh. That's just moving people around, you know, moving people, moving horses, moving chariots, moving vehicles. So safety is the biggest. You just have to make sure everybody is safe and it happens efficiently and smoothly. We're 20 minutes past wrap. We've got everything that Ridley wanted. He's a happy day and a little bit more. We weren't going to do an on-board chariot shot, but we got it, and that, Ridley's happy. Could have wrapped on time. I'd have been happier that way.
That was the first 4.5 weeks. And in the middle of that, we shot on the tank for water elements and on the paddock tank for a big exterior Memphis temple.
Action!
We have an animatronic in the tank, two separate crocodiles, for the attack on the fisherman's boat. He'll be dropped into the tank, he'll be used for towing through the water, some wrestling with stuntmen in the water. We can't really get near the boat with him because there's a big deep pit around the boat. We might be able to rest him on the boat, sliding off the bank, that kind of thing.
Cameras ready, here we go. Shooting, wind up, ready, and 3, 2, 1, action!
The digital guys are going to be doing larger elements of it, but
Part of it was for the grabbing of one of the stuntmen and dragging them into the water, and I think that, and also smashing through the boat.
Action.
Paddock tank was probably our biggest and most problematic, as the fact that the tank, being a tank, was full of water, and we had to recreate the Nile banks, whether that be reed beds, papyrus. So all in all, with the papyrus as well, you've probably got 4,000 to 5,000 plants to recreate the Nile. But the good old British weather, with the wind blowing and the rain, that was rather unpleasant, and to make it look like you're in Egypt is quite interesting.
We've also used the underwater stage, which for the part of the Red Sea sequence we've been able to shoot all the underwater stuff that we wanted to do. So it's great that you can actually walk from the stage down to the exterior of the Nile and then to the interior underneath the Red Sea, all within a 2-minute walk of each other.
Guys, just need to sink a little bit deeper if possible, please.
Just suddenly got a bit cloudy. Big movies tend to have a kind of an elephant cadence, you know. They move like a scene a day or something, you know. Little movies, little independent movies, you shoot like cracking pace. Sometimes you do like 4 scenes in a day and there's like this real galloping pace to it. And big movies, they lumber. But not Ridley's movies. Yeah, they're like an elephant, but elephants can run fast too. And he likes to run fast. He likes to do it quickly. He knows what he wants. He's super prepared. Even with such an incredible amount of people, you could still get a lot done in one day. And it keeps everybody on their toes too. I mean, right down the line, from actors through to everybody. Everybody knows that this thing is not going to slow down.
The work of God.
I really loved it when we got to Spain and the sets were outdoors. And you get the wind blowing through, you get inconveniences, you get things that weren't meant to happen, and that's what I feel much more comfortable with.
We left and went to mainland Spain, to Almeria, to shoot the biggest battle sequence in the film, and we also built the biggest exterior set, the 2 cities of Pyramses and Memphis.
One of the biggest sets I think I've ever seen. We've built scale, because that's what Ridley wants, and that's what this film needs.
It's so massive, and what's interesting is that the center of the whole thing was Ridley, and he seems comfortable the bigger things are.
Almeria is a place where Sergio Leone did a lot of his spaghetti westerns. Everyone thinks, spaghetti western are made in Italy. None of them in Italy, they're all made in Almeria. And I'd done a couple of commercials down there over the years, and it's a hot desert, a hot, dusty desert. But quite surprisingly beautiful, spectacular. In America, we call it Badlands. There's a bit of flat desert here and there, but fundamentally it's all Badland rocks.
We did 5 weeks in Almeria, and that in itself was split into sort of 4 beats. There was sort of a location element to that, which is sort of snake hunts. Battlefield was there, so there's that location side. And then on our main site, there was the Viceroy's Villa up on the hill. There was the Egyptian town, which plays for Memphis streets and Pyramsi Street, the everyday man and woman who has to live through these plagues.
Grandiose sets, the like of which I've not really seen since I did a film in Spain called Empire of the Sun, and they had just these amazing sets for that. And this was incredible. There was about a kilometre-long set, you know, which ended with the city of Pyramses, and then incorporated the ghetto and, you know, these enormous statues. They're fantastic and equally wonderful and intimidating at the same time, because, you know, you're going down to this place and looking at the work that everybody's put in and thinking, oh man, and now they're all going to be looking at me, expecting me to do something, hopefully good. And you hope you can pull it off.
There's something the Skull has to tell you. Not here.
Say where am I?
The prayer house, tonight. Here.
What's your name?
Joshua.
We're probably looking at our crew numbers when we were in Almeria. We were probably running at about 1,200 people employed directly on the film. You know, plus there's the ancillaries that go with that.
You took out a UK crew of 300-400 people. You're adding onto that a Spanish contingent. That's sort of 400 or 500. So you're up to 1,000 before you've really got into any extras.
We've used to date 10,600 man days of extras.
We have casting and making phone calls the day before, and transportation, organizing all the routes, all the pickup points from 3-4 o'clock in the morning. They all come to the warehouse to get ready for costume, makeup, hair.
You've got to maximise the daylight. So we're on at 8 o'clock. You want the crowd ready at 8:30. Your principal cast are ready at 9. You're shooting by 9:30, and you're done at 5.
I knew it was going to be huge, but I don't think I quite realised just how huge it was going to be, because somehow, like today, we should have had 300 extras, we had 600. So that's a huge scale. I've got something like 70 makeup artists here. The day could start at 4:30 or 5, and then they stagger the extras in. And what we do is we line them up as they're done in a big line and go through everybody, so everybody's checked. They don't leave until they've been checked. And, you know, I've just got fantastic people running the crowd. They're brilliant, you know, brilliant makeup artists.
When we had big crowd days, we'd be there at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting the crowd ready. And it was a big factory, almost like we had those huge warehouses where it was very sectioned off in costume, then hair and makeup, and then we had to then put them on the bus and then ship them to, sometimes we were on location an hour away. And then we had to have teams ready at location to make sure, because by the time they traveled, they needed to be checked again.
I remember one day being in Spain and hearing this kind of radio call. Some person, slightly distressed voice, like, how am I supposed to carry lunch for 200 people?
Every day, I mean, catering they have to have enough food, they have to have marquees, chairs, tables. So it's basically just like a whole circus moving every 10 minutes. It can become very challenging, also depending on the location, because you have to find places where to set up the food, what food you're going to give them, how long are they going to have. You also have to have, for example, medics if someone gets sick. So there's a lot of logistics that when you talk about it before making the movie, it all sounds really simple, but once you're on the set, then it's another thing.
Today we're here at Sorbas, which is a little area in Almeria, and we're at the Royal Egyptian Olive Grove, where Moses' band are attacking the garrison guarding all the royal oil. and there's going to be a little bit of a fire and explosive effect.
A new flame close-up of the road that it's lit. Point those cameras at it.
Your guys are going to run to jump over this thing, leap over there, and Chris is going to run it across by the bench, go around, stop there, look back.
This was a semi-derelict olive press and store facility that's been abandoned for decades, and we renovated it. It has magnificent vistas over a gigantic olive grove, which we want to take advantage of its position.
Marker.
Here we are in Machiel Quarry, famous for its marbles round the world, shooting a scene which is not taking place here. It's actually taking place in northern Syria.
We found the quarry, which is one of the oldest quarries for white marble. There's a bluish white marble, which is kind of spectacular, in Spain. I think that quarry's been giving off marble to the Vatican. So it's that old, and they just gradually carved up this mountain. It's massive.
We should concentrate all our strength in the center.
You should concentrate your strength on fighting. Leave the generalship to me.
That would become fundamentally the melting pot of the workforce of the Hebrews, the slaves.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, you're dirty. Thank you. That's beautiful. This needs a lot of work.
I'll bring him in here.
You stood here and we said we'd never see that.
I wanted to join that, so when I see him, he looks into the quarry, and then he moves to his right and heads towards, essentially will be Pyramses, seeing one old pyramid that's been completed.
Action, go!
Once we went to the quarry last week, it was amazing. I mean, we had elephants and we had camels and extras dressed as slaves. And it was just a huge set, and to be able to put all those elements together with the cameras and the makeup, the costumes, and it was something very spectacular.
We've been incredibly lucky. I mean, really lucky with the weather, but we had the most incredible sandstorm.
It comes up like a squall, and with that heat and in those mountains, you've got to watch yourself, because suddenly you'll get what is like a tsunami wind comes in.
We were in the corner of the set, so reasonably protected, but we were bringing in a 40 foot by 40 foot black negative fill.
There's the scene with Ramses where he's saying, "Get this up faster, or I'll have to kill somebody."
Is there a problem? It's not done.
It won't be long now.
You said that months ago. Or do I have to kill someone?
And unfortunately, we were just in the process, and a gust of wind caught it. We hadn't quite tied it down, and it's a sail. It's a very, very big sail. The crane, unfortunately, wasn't locked off. It was still moving, and that meant the arm swung, and that meant that, this whole thing. And you just think, holy moly, I've got people underneath this.
Mark Huffman was over on the left then. The wind came from nowhere, and hit the frame. The frame just flipped.
The frame itself didn't hit anybody. It caught a piece of the set.
A bit of the set decided to come along and hit me on the head, but anyway, fairly hard-headed, so it was all right.
Somebody actually has got a little picture where if you took a photo before the sandstorm hit, very pink and in the clouds. It's almost like the face of Jesus, almost looking down. Or even could be the face of God. What are you doing down there?
Last night we had a biblical windstorm. Perhaps God was trying to tell us something about our hubris of trying to compete with him in terms of natural events. We sustained quite a bit of damage last night.
Rolling motor. Action, action.
We had a fairly large battle sequence to film, so we had 140 horses to cater for, get them there, get them back, get them fed, look after everything that comes out of both ends of a horse.
All saddled, all period bridles, everything on board that would look either Hittite or Egyptian.
Really somewhere. So you get the mounted pictures from behind.
Let's do it.
When we did the battle scene, we had a fold-away magnetic tabletop model of the entire battlefield with all the elements, with little miniature horses and chariots, little magnetic tents, so that we could discuss every setup with all the people involved.
You never get enough time for battles, and I think we scheduled 5 days, which is kind of crazy. I'll get the big stuff. I'll get the stuff with Christian and with Joel.
The sheer logistics of trying to shoot a battle in 6 days. I don't know any other director that does it in 6 days.
Now you're shot. Cutting through you strong, you know. You remember what's happening. You can react off that chariot.
I came up with a beat-it-out beat sheet for it, which would then we'd go to him and he'd go, yeah, like that. Don't change these bits of that around. Use that bit in a different spot. So we try to choreograph more of a story of Ramses' journey through it and a story of Moses' journey through it, and then sort of amalgamate the two with a big choreographed piece of action around that sort of circular piece.
All these chariots coming out here are going to get it. We will have a guy dragging at the back of it. Yeah, they're all going to get it. There's going to be like 5 or 6.
Rob, I've worked with now quite a few times. Rob is essentially a very good horseman, and he evolved into everything. Stunts and wire work and weapons, and so I use him every time now. And it's choreography in the best sense of the word.
Back to them, boom! Bring up. Got archers in the back of that, they can follow the chariot through in front of the back.
We're trying to recreate the biggest historic chariot battle that's ever been. We've probably got the most chariots that's ever worked on a movie before all together at the same time. We're running like 35 chariots. So you double that up, that's over 70 horses, and then we've got some of those that are 3-horse chariots, which are a little bit more tricky.
So the 3-horse should be over there.
So if he's flew down there,
yep.
We put him, this is pretty easy.
Yep.
Some of the biggest challenges that we got is getting them built quick enough and getting them built light enough for what we do. Those chariots were coming in at like 350 kilos, I think, some of them. And the 3-horse ones were weighing like 1/4 of a ton. They were huge, really, big and heavy. So being able to adapt what we wanted to do stunt-wise with flipping them and stuff like that was a big challenge.
See, chariot weighs about 500 pounds. Twin horses in the front that will run carriage full gallop. The carriages are gilded and have got arrow quivers, permanent quivers in the sides, and they're there for lances and arrows. And there's a driver and there will be an archer. Sometimes there's a three-man carriage with a stand side-by-side driver in the middle, two archers left and right.
You know, what we've tried to do in this is make it all live. So normally if you see action sequences in a movie before, they would have been towed in on a vehicle for them to flip, but we've choreographed it so that they can be flipped with the horses in it, so we can release them and somersault them. You see these motorcycle trick ramps, and we basically, you know, we tested and tested, ended up doing a normal cheese wedge side, and then we came up with this idea that they had to be concaved, and it's, you know, it's amazing. We can get, you know, a ramp that's that high that when it concaves, it just flicks the chariot up on its end.
We've managed to create the action with the chariots, keeping the horses involved all the time. I mean, we've obviously spent a lot of time to make sure safety-wise and nothing can happen to the horses, but what Ridley's really afforded us is that we're doing this in real time with the horses, so the chariots are getting knocked over in the battle, they're crashing into each other, but every shot we've done there, we've managed to keep the horse in a completely safe environment but connected to the chariot.
Some of the stuff in the Hittite battle where I've got kind of 6 horses running parallel and barging into each other is pretty unusual.
We dismantle Ramses' chariot piece by piece until there's nothing left of it, which is brilliant. And keeping all the other horses around it and in his chariot with him, not just done it on a rig and we've CGI'd the horses in afterwards, to keep it really real.
Yeah, Joel and Christian have really been in the chariots and they've really been doing the stuff with the stunt guys, you know. We haven't just shot them against blue screen or towed them round on a camera car. They've really been behind the horses, pelting along at full speed in places in fairly dangerous conditions.
Take that out and smash the guy in the face with the hood.
That was one that we rehearsed for a long time before, and I never actually got to do everything that we had rehearsed. We had a lot of fighting from horseback. And I always had a concern of, well, did we manage to get enough? But yeah, Ridley, you know, he knows how to really shoot those scenes. So I would go to him and say, you know, we didn't get everything that we were. It's no problem. I got it.
Background action.
It's one of those situations where you know that it's going to look good, but then you see it and you go, wow, it looks really good. You know, because when you're in the middle of it, you can't see the wood for the trees.
There's not going to be a proper fall, we're just going to mark it.
It's fine. Right, here we go.
We had an incredible stunt team. Rob Inch, who I'd worked with back in 2003, it was great to be reunited with him, and he had an incredible team. Dan, who's in control of, you know, the horses and the whole chariot team and the fight team. So, you know, I got to do a lot of fight choreography. Ridley doesn't sit around waiting for it. He's the guy early in the morning who's cranking the wheel, and he wants it to move quickly.
I think somebody ought to drive through it right now, so we're not fucking guessing.
That is correct.
Can I see something happen, please? I believe you. I just want to get all these other fuckers carrying their cameras themselves.
Okay, but this camera is fine. We can paint it out.
All right, we know what the action is.
I think he's fantastically impatient, and his impatience drives people.
Well, let's get Ramses coming into the pump first. His driver could take a hit here and stagger in the sun.
And that'll be it.
Make a car.
Yep.
Speed is one thing for him, and detail is another. And you've got to hit both of those.
Wow. Yeah, great. Somersault right there, okay? Yeah.
You've got to get it right quickly, and you've also got to do it with a bit of panache.
This is pretty. Can he go? He's going pretty well. Do the whole thing again, Tim, and don't tilt down.
Action.
Most people work with 2 or 3 cameras. He can work with 9 cameras. And that's about, I think, seeing your action, your story, as a creative box. Within there, you just say, well, I can put a camera here because I want to get that detail, and I need to get that bit, I need to get that bit, I need to get that bit. But now this camera is seeing over here and would see that camera, but if I build a wall in front of that camera, nobody's ever going to know that that camera is behind that wall. Brilliant, done. And now that camera's over there, he's going to pan over on that truck, so I need to do something with that. They bring me 50 extras, put them there, you'll never know that camera's there. And you just have to look at it creatively. If you're director of photography, and Dariusz Wolski is, pretty unique in that aspect of being able to do that many cameras from that many angles.
You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One rig here. Yep.
It stops you from feeling like there's just this one camera focusing on you, and no matter how much you try to pretend it's not there, it's more present. It makes its presence felt much more because there's one. When you've got 7 cameras around you, you really can't ignore them because, you're not going to be distracted by 7. Now you can just look at the other actors and that's it, and just ignore them because it's more like kind of being in the round. And then also wonderful to know that, he got everything. He didn't need to do a separate piece of coverage for that. So it keeps it much more fresh.
Perfect. Attack him. Now, a guy coming from foreground was too late. As soon as Christian looks at him, he should go. As soon as Christian looks, he should go.
We had a helicopter looking at the whole set with 10 cameras that Ridley likes to use. So basically he sees the world and you have to just be ready to move everybody in like 5 minutes.
Each camera then has 3 people on it. You've got your operator, you've got your focus, your first AC and your second AC. You pull back into the tech world. They've all got a fibre cable that takes them back to the 3D village. They're all plugged in, but somebody has got to run that cable. So you've then got a team of 3D guys that are running fibre cables from their station over to the cameras. Now, you've got 500 extras, 80 horses, 40 chariots, stuntmen galore. You can't just leave these cables on the ground. You have to dig them all in. So you have to create channels. And then you're feeding the video tent, and they've got their guys, and there's 3 guys in there, and Ridley's sitting in front of 9, 10, 11 screens, watching them all the time, cutting in his head between them. And that's quite a skill.
The Canary Islands were fantastic. I think we were at 970 crew members while we were in Fuerteventura. So it's a lot of hotel rooms.
What a great place. Tough to film in, the wind is a pain in the arse, but it all worked.
The whole sort of chariot chase, chasing the Israelites up to the Red Sea, it's an amazing sequence. It's a road movie for chariots.
As we moved to the Canary Islands, we were talking a lot of Exodus section of the film, the Egyptians pursuing the Hebrews who are heading towards the Red Sea. So a lot of big physical set pieces. I mean, massive amounts of chariots galloping across sand plains and passing very treacherous mountainous areas with vistas, beautiful vistas,
Fuerteventura is a rock in the middle of the sea. It's an island in the middle of the sea, but quite an incredible island. One end you've got a flat desert. The other end you've got a duney desert. In the middle you've got pretty high mountains that you can film in. And so it made it perfect for us to film the runaway from Paramses, the chase, the exodus, the trails of people across desert, across mountains, all the way to the Red Sea and the entry into the Red Sea.
Ridley's vision of the Red Sea is very much his vision across the film. For those people who will know the story.
You lose the ground, right? Yeah.
He wants them to instantly recognise the story. He also does want to set the story in a real world.
Ramesses, 4,000 men, 1,000 chariots. How far behind us? 4 days.
less if they don't rest the horses.
When we moved from Almeria to Fuerteventura, I think we put on 96 trucks of equipment, vehicles, and then on top of that, a whole load of 4x4s to get people around.
We chartered 2 massive aeroplanes full of crew, and we moved from one location to another in 3 days from Almeria to here. So it's a kind of military operation to a degree, the way these guys work.
The Exodus itself is 500 people strong, with camels, goats, ducks, chickens, horses, mules, donkeys, handheld carts, animal-pulled carts, weapons, hay bales, dust effects, smoke effects. Everything is in that moment. So in terms of the logistics and the size of it, it did suddenly go kapoom.
In the Canary Islands, we worked with the regular military there, and very difficult locations, and they just supplied us with logistics and manpower to make them work, and it was great. Of course, we had the pursuing Egyptian army, which consisted of many rail chariots, the soldiers, the cavalry, so a large number of horses again. But with our Israelites, we have them travelling with all their animals, so we had rented every camel we possibly could within the Canary Islands, and which there are quite a lot.
It's an exodus in itself, really, the scale of this film.
In Fuerteventura and the Canaries, they've got some of the best roads I've ever seen in the world. I saw there was like a 20-mile run of freeway, which was closed down, never been used. So it became my set back lot for the carriages, and because I was able to go in there, run along the edge of the freeway, and there was a high bank. I found high banks like rock face, and on top of that, the rock face was a road. So the road is 20 feet above my highway, and it runs for miles. And so I've got a set I could never afford to build. So I said, we're going to use that. We used that and did all that stuff, racing on and fitting it, then cloning it into the valley at Confetti Beach.
The most challenging it became was on this one stretch of road, which is an incredible view down onto Confetti Beach. It's called Confetti Road. As you drive down it, it's a sort of 6-kilometre piece of road that is only 4.5 metres wide. And we wanted to film 15 chariots and 40 horses charging down there with tracking vehicles, ground cameras, smoke effects, dust effects, visual effects, props, everything.
The big problem for us there was that is an existing road, but because it's a modern road, it's quite wide. And to get a feel for those shots, that those chariots are on a very narrow precipice type road, we had to narrow that road down.
Don't go over the rocks, boys, because that's the mountain.
Which meant importing a lot of volcanic rock.
Some guys with shovels. Compala.
Placing up that on the outer edge of the road to narrow it and force the chariots into the inner side cliff edge. We
scraped it and made it our narrow highway, which would have been an evolution on a shepherd's road 5,000 years ago.
The logistics of just getting 30-odd chariots to some of these locations, you can't get in there with decent-sized trucks, so you've got to offload it all, and then you've got to take all the chariots on smaller trucks, and then you've got to tow them in on quad bikes and all the rest of it, and get all the horses up there. We've taken these chariots to incredibly dangerous pieces of road. I mean, slopes, like that with a narrow road with incredible stunt and horse riders. Cornering. A lot of them had brakes put in, disc brakes. The special effects guys put disc brakes in the chariot so that the stunt riders at least had the security of being able to put the brakes on a bit on a corner. Then the chariots have to basically go at full speed, gallop speed, around hairpin bends on the edge of almost sheer drops off the side of a mountain.
We had chariots shooting down there at about 18 miles an hour. It's hairy. Ramsay's pursuit makes him reckless, and in being reckless, somebody goes over the top. Then there's a kind of like a disastrous collision, like you might get in a freeway. And that was a collision of horses, riders, charioteers, who all go over the top. That was tricky.
Chariot on his inside, which is so confused as you're going to the way now, isn't it? So exactly. So he should look this side at some point. Then they bump the wall, and that's when he's going to say.
He's going to be kneeling with which hand?
I'm getting it from left, but I just want to take it in.
Kneeling down there.
Okay, are we good, Kenny? Ready?
We're
rolling.
Hey, 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 hey!
It's a lot of wire work, you know. They're going to go over the top, like a 20-foot drop. You've got to pluck the guy out on wire with a crane. Cranes are plucking these guys out and then letting them fly and then hit them out. So it's kind of dangerous, so it needs a lot of coordination.
We worked on 4 beaches in Fuerteventura for different parts of the Red Sea.
The toughest was, of course, Cofeti.
Cofeti Beach is the biggest beach I've ever seen. No hotels, no houses, nothing. Spectacular sand beaches and sea. And right at the back of it, a mountain range which is just spectacular.
It was this prehistoric looking place, looked absolutely untouched. Stunning views. You know, these high mountains going directly down with a small bit of beach, but that beach runs for maybe 10 miles, down to this very tumultuous sea with really strong currents.
It has the Atlantic, it has the currents around the island, so we had to be very careful when anybody went into the water. There were always the lifeguards there.
I think the beach is very tricky. There's an undertow, there's massive, and the waves incoming are pretty strong. I often wonder why there were no surfers, and the guy said because it's dangerous. He said people try to surf then have drowned.
Those waters are coming in, you know, across from the Caribbean, across from America, and there's nothing in their way. And the riptide that can be there, it's not always there, it's there sometimes. You could just get knocked off your feet by a wave that you don't think is that big, and you'll be under, and 10 minutes later, you're 2 miles down the beach. And that's the strength of that sea.
Somebody died just about a week before we got there. Stupid old me, I would jump in anyway and I'd go for a swim, which the makeup people weren't very happy with me about. But, you know, we had to be shooting the scenes where Moses was coming out of the ocean, you know, afterwards.
Like any time you go onto a beach with a large tidal shift, you know you're going to run in and you're going to run out with the tide, and that's just so it's a matter of getting your tides as right as you can. Unfortunately, you know, the tide chart is a very good guide, but it depends. If there's high pressure in the Atlantic, the tide will not be quite where it's meant to be. If there's low pressure in the Atlantic, it'll be somewhere different.
From my point of view, it was just spectacular. But when you're trying to move your unit and your set, which is people's belongings and camera positions, the bloody camera position changes all the time. because the tide's going in and out, and so you're constantly on the move.
Fuerteventura is known as the Windy Island, and there's a good reason, but especially with Ridley, he is so versatile. You get a bit of inclement weather and he thinks it's great, and he comes up with, he says, no, we'll shoot this scene because this will look really good in stormy weather, and that's exactly what we did.
You have a constant offshore wind, which keeps the skies clear, and if there's clouds, the clouds flying, so you get beautiful shadow. And the wind kept it all clear most of the time, and we went there the right time of the year, so it wasn't too hot, and it wasn't cold. It was spectacular.
Hey! Hey! Ella! Ella! Hey! Hey!
We cross here. We cross here. Ready yourselves! We cross here!
When you're planning, how do I do the parting of the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, you can't go do what they did 50, 60 years ago. You can't really do that. It's a bit dodgy, you know. The wall of water all hovering and quivering. They're waiting for them to cross.
Go! Ready yourselves!
We didn't want to make it look like Charlton Heston's Red Sea, though there was, at that time, there was nothing wrong with it, but it would just feel less believable today. So he'd come up with a very clever approach, which I think will be much more spectacular, yet people will be able to understand it from events that have happened in the real world in the last 20 years.
Before I start, if instead of this, doing that, when the wire's coming, I'm just like this.
I tend to look for something that had occurred, so tsunami's a good idea about draining out tsunami.
No one's quite sure of the time period or whatever, but there certainly was a tsunami in a similar period. So we've kind of robbed a bit from real history, used it, and we've robbed a bit from recent history that people are going to be used to seeing or have now seen how devastating and destructive it can be.
You have honored me with your trust. Now I honor you with my faith. Follow me and you will be free. Stay and you will perish.
I think generally when you think of a Red Sea and you think of the biblical side of the Red Sea, you think parting. And as far as I know, he went, no, one direction. And that gave us much more scope in terms of locations. So we weren't faced with a kind of bit of sandy bit and two walls of water. You suddenly could shoot in fantastic flat beaches or flat sands as the journey across the middle. You could create great views. It gave you so much more scope to be creative.
We cross here! Hold! Right! Hey, I'm a
Ridley draws a storyboard, having worked with Arthur Max. They've seen some picture locations. They've done a basic location scout, so he has that in his head. From that, a more cemented idea of a location. And that, for us, was 4 different beaches on Fuerteventura.
We used 2 different beaches for the 2 separate shorelines, so where they actually enter the Red Sea and where they come out of the Red Sea are 2 separate beaches. And then we used 2 more beaches for the various pieces of the seabed for the crossing of the straits.
Copy, copy.
We've got Sotavento, where for 4 days each month it's completely bone dry, but for little areas of water at high tide. There's your seabed. There is your seabed. 11 kilometres of seabed for most of the day. Well, that's, that was a gift.
We've shot all the crowd. We've shot them in various different stages of Red Sea crossings, going in, coming out, the wave hitting.
There's a beach there called El Cotillo, or Lighthouse Beach, and there is a tank. Every day the water comes in and you've got a tank of warm water like that. We blocked it off when it came to high tide, so we had control of it, and all of a sudden you can go in there all day, you can create what you like. Get people in there safely, you can make the water move, you can take it out, you can put it in. What a fantastic gift to have.
Now, what you don't see is like the line of 10 jet skis that we're walking right next to, because they've got to create the current, you know, and there's these guys sitting on these jet skis, but they're holding it by a rope, so it's great. And all of the people who just have been wading in and out all day long. But I sort of enjoy that, you know, when you're just freezing and the wind is blowing and the sand is smashing into you. But, you know, you're all in it together, and you know it's going to be worth it ultimately. And, you know, sure, you might get a bit of a cold or whatever, get a bit ill from it, but, you know, never mind. I had a lot of fun working with Aaron because he's got a real gag reflex, and he finds it very hard to control that around camel poo.
So much camel shit.
And there was a lot of that in crossing the Red Sea because we'd do it so many times, the camels would just start pooping. So then we'd be walking through and it would just be swilling around.
I have the worst gag reflex. Oh, do you hear me? Oh, you're right. No, all the way out. Oh, just you go. Oh.
These are when, like, always look on the bright side of life starts going through my head, because then I turn around and I'm looking at Joshua and it's a big moment. We're crossing the Red Sea. But he's desperately trying not to throw up. He's dry heaving and bent over. And on top of that, he's trying to hold his moustache on because it's glued on and it's going to drop off in the ocean any minute. So it was fantastic. And then I would purposely kind of push the camel poop over towards him because I wanted to see that. I wanted to see if he could hold it together on the camera.
We got down here on the morning we were going to shoot on this beach, and it was flooded. The tide was in, the lagoon hadn't emptied out.
We got beached. Didn't see how deep that was, and kind of went through it.
And we were walking around in like 4 inches of sludge, and I thought, God almighty, it's just not going to work. How are we going to do it? And anyway, you know, an hour or two went past, the lagoon drained, the sand got a bit harder. And, you know, there again, you've got these incredible horses that are just so strong. When you put 30 sets of horses on 15 chariots and tell them to gallop across the sand, they did it. And they pulled the chariots through the lagoon, and the camera car was going alongside, and they got a backlit shot with the water spraying up with 15 chariots in full gallop, and it was absolutely incredible.
The day's filming generally has a great vibe, there's energy. You've got a director who has phenomenal energy, likes to keep it going.
Camera down here, pushing as it goes up.
You know, he keeps an energy level on the setup, which is infectious.
Can you see it?
Really? Yeah, no, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's great.
I think he has a huge advantage of he loves every minute of every day. Even if it's not going the way he wants it, he loves solving the problems. It's almost like make it as difficult as you can for me, because I'll find a way of doing it. And the more challenging it is, the more he thrives.
We carved a mountain path here. They'll both go down here and hit the plane.
I don't think anybody makes films anymore on this scale. And what people don't appreciate is that mostly it's for real. That yes, there is a lot of visual effects work, but the landscapes we go to and the size of the landscapes are the landscapes. That is not visual effects.
That's a wrap.
You know, it was an incredibly rich and detailed script, but Ridley also will take things that are a sentence or two on the page, and suddenly you're getting footage back where people are catching on fire, and it expands when he gets his hands on it.
Magic is made in editorial. It's where the story is made. You know, you have all the building blocks, but it's where the story can really come together and become something fantastic.
It's my first experience with epic, and in Ridley's epic means really epic. Big emotions, battles, the confrontation between characters.
I am not talking to you!
Arthur and Ridley designed these amazing sets, which were a fantastic springboard for all of our visual effects.
40 years ago, you had to build it. And to a certain extent, what I always do is I build a bit and then add a lot. And the adding a lot, it looks, in effect, completely real.
I think the biggest challenge on the film was really just to represent the period of 1300 BC in the proper way. Of working with Ridley in the art department, Arthur Max, the production designer, we really went into the detail of what the buildings and environments would be. So it was all based on history books and what exists now in present day Egypt, and trying to imagine the kind of realism of it at that period in time. And then really looking at, first of all, how light falls on large buildings. So we looked at a lot of the areas, large vistas like the Vatican, and seeing how Egypt was laid out in a very geometric way. So we followed those guidelines, and obviously we wanted the scale to be accurate. And then the rendering really is taking away the degradation that's happened on the stuff that exists in Egypt, and really trying to imagine it as being freshly made, because obviously during the period of the film it goes from Seti's reign into Ramses' reign. We're shooting scene 5, which is all the Egyptian soldiers go off to the Battle of Kadesh. The green screen really gives us a line in order to do our set extensions. Obviously the world of Memphis that we're building behind us is much bigger than the budget for the art direction would allow, so therefore we're digitally extending all of the sets. Everything's growing in size and just really increasing the scale of what you're going to see. The green post really marks certain areas of the set that are going to be replaced with digital extensions, and it just allows all the chariots not to go into those areas, so that they get a physical idea of where the digital extensions would be. Because Ridley likes to shoot in realistic environments, he wants as much in real as possible. The sets were large and expansive, the rendering was how he wanted it, so we could just expand on those areas. But it was good to see the real lighting on a real large piece of set, so that could inform us as to how the rest of the visual effects would be.
If I'm building 20 60-foot columns, I'll only build 10 or 5 12-foot sections of the correct diameter of a 60-foot column. I'll put the rest in. But what I build has got to be perfect, because they're going to copy it. They're going to sample it and copy it.
Can I have have the horse with half a chariot ready here on overlap.
I mean, the man is amazing in his energy levels. He draws brilliantly, has a great sense of composition. He's done visual effects. You kind of look at his drawing and then you look at what we're doing, and the two match. Right from the outset, he has a clear idea about what he wants and represents it on paper, hands you that piece of paper, and that's what you do.
We're adding a lot of CG arrows, so it's just going to be a lot of CG arrows, a lot of set extension. Like any profile shots following the horses down, you want to extend the horses down. And same with any time you look off past a set, there's going to be an army extension basically.
We've maybe shot 10 or 15 or 20 chariots together as a group, and those are elements that will be repeated from scans, from digital models, all the rest of it. Peter Chang's going to do his work and make these few chariots that we built seem like an army of 1,000.
A certain amount of chariots and horses that can be replicated in post. The unsung heroes of filmmaking these days, these numerous people who spend countless months anonymously creating this stuff that makes a movie seem real when sections of it are not.
I think Ridley's take on it has been, really clever. I think he's sort of looked at the past and what's been done and the Cecil B. DeMille film and all those past Ten Commandments epics. And his take on it really is to try and represent things in a naturalistic way, to take those to a level that allows us to expand on what people have seen before. So the frogs become no longer just frogs that are hopping around, they become in excess. We have these mud surges, lava flows of frogs through the streets rather than just a lot of them around. The flies become very distinctive, thick in their movement. The locusts become even more difficult, in terms of how they move.
All of these locusts have then been rendered through the two separate stereo cameras in order so that they then sit correctly in depth, so you have left, right and right cameras to create the stereo effect of the locusts going away from camera.
We're trying to make a clear differentiation between how they move and the flies move, and then all the other places, the explanation for why the Nile has turned red, the reason, crocodiles eating each other and the blood and all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of naturalistic explanations for why these events happen, and that's sort of led to, some very creative visual effects design. You talk about Moses, you talk about the Red Sea, and I think the parting of the Red Sea and the way that Ridley's going to represent that is an amazing look at the true explanation, or an explanation of what could have happened in order to make the crossing achievable. It's the design of that that's really been fantastic on the film, in creating the look of the tsunami, so that he's used the idea that instead of the magical parting of the Red Sea with the staff, so a tsunami is the reason why the water drained from the Red Sea in order to let the Hebrews cross. And that idea has kind of led to some amazing, vistas that you'll see in the film. Fuerteventura, the location where we shot most of the barren landscapes in the Red Sea, and to be out there in that, large vista, barren landscape, really served as a great inspiration for how we would approach the large vistas. I must have looked at every surfing film, that's ever been made, but I think the tallest wave that's been surfed is something like 90 feet. Our tsunami wave represented in the film is 180 feet. So therefore, there's a scale issue with looking at references of surfers. It serves as a great guide as to, there's a physics as to why, surfs break and the way that waves form. So we really took those ideas and just sort of times it by 2. So all of the detail is times by 2. We're very conscious of keeping size and the structure and the mass and the weight, but really taking the smaller elements like the displacement on the waves moving up, the white foam, the texture, and using those as markers to just sort of try and broadcast how big this wave would actually be. We are right in the throes of finishing it. We've got 1,374 shots in the film. They're all piling it at once. You know, I start my day at 8 o'clock and I end up, you know, till about 10 o'clock in the evening, and all I do is sit in a dark room looking at one shot after another, making comments about it. So, you know, you're caught us at a time where it's absolute hell.
Editorial and visual effects relationship is always interesting because they have a lot of work to do, and I feel like they work at the widget factory and we work at the dream factory, even though they create the dreams, but their work is so focused on pieces that I think sometimes they lose sight of that it's a story. And so a lot of times, you know, we have to kind of say like, we need these 10 shots because they tell the story, and you gave us these 20. You could have done those at the end. People don't realize they think post takes a long time, but it took a long time to develop the script. It took a long time to do pre-production. It takes a long time to shoot it. And, you know, some of these visual effects can take 6 months to do. It takes 10 to 12 weeks to cut the film, and then it has to be recut with notes and comments. So, in fairness to visual effects and our process, and someone has to compose on this movie more than 2 hours of music.
I saw the film, it was one of the first cuts, and I was very surprised or even collapsed about how much music. At the same time, I was very excited because this possibility to go to the intimate, to the big scale, and to the emotions, and so I had all the palette of music to do, and it was a challenge.
He's a seriously talented Spanish composer. I thought he did great stuff, but one of the particular things I liked was the John le Carré film, Tinker Tailor. I thought the score for that was very interesting.
Our intention was to do something that is true and that you can understand and follow and be really part of the film.
It has to be, in a sense, orchestral big. It is big. There's a lot of philharmonic scale music in this, but you know, it's how do you pull that off without getting too traditional? So in there's a lot of characterization within special instruments, which are ancient ethnic sounds, which I love, which just are so evocative. They're beautiful and have emotional impact. So it's a matter of mixing orchestral with, you know, interesting combinations.
What he wanted was a very expressive music. He needed themes and a good structure for the film through these themes, like having a theme for Moses, a theme for Ramses, a theme for the freedom, a theme for the idea of, I don't know, maybe God. Or so the main elements on the film has a mirror on the music, and with all these themes we worked very hard to make a net, the line of the story, a kind of electricity that goes through all the film. One of my favorites is when Moses says goodbye to his mother and sister, and one of the most difficult to find exactly the emotion, not to be too much or too less. So I understood what Ridley wanted to have there, and how everything has to be growing up. score has an inspiration, of course, from the old movies, from the old scores, from the 50s. A lot of influence from the tunes and popular melodies, folk songs from East Asia. Also is connected with the epic films that we have today.
Hi. So incredible. It's so incredible.
I'm in Abbey Road here. We are recording the score. Today we have an incredible singer coming from Tunisia. He's giving us a lot of new things, and so a very special moment now. That's good when you. Oh, beautiful. Nicholas Dodd was our orchestrator and conductor. He did an incredible work here in Abbey Road. All the team helped me a lot, coming of course from Ridley. I understood the film very much through the film editor, the music editor. We made a beautiful team.
It's a massive movie, it's a huge undertaking, but I had been around it for a long time. So even though I hadn't been the main editor on his films, I had seen how he worked, and I had worked under Pietro for many, many years, so it wasn't something that I was walking into with zero experience.
I worked with Billy way back when he was as an assistant with Pietro Scalia, and then he went off to edit himself, and then we were having a problem with a film, and I brought Billy in to take over the editing, and he fixed that, and I was kind of really impressed the way he worked. Talented, very talented editor, and very thoughtful and very sensitive, very good with music and temp score and things like that.
Something about it makes it feel like we're on board, you know, like the two shots are connected.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can separate it more from the Egyptian? When we actually started getting footage in and when we actually put the whole film together, I was really surprised by, for example, how emotional it was, which, you know, it's right there on the page, but it wasn't obvious to me. It just, you know, I understood the scale of it, and I saw that there was a lot of excitement, and it was an interesting story about Moses and Ramses and their whole backstory and growing up in the palace. But actually what the film became, you know, later on wasn't immediately apparent to me.
Camera up.
They shot well over 300 hours of footage on this movie. You know, there were days where we would get 5 and 6 hours of footage a day.
On a film like this, we'll have well over like 1 million feet of film. And to use a crude kind of thing, you might shoot 1 million or 1.2 million feet of film. The end product is only 12,000 feet. So someone's got to do all that work and look at every frame. And an editor like Billy, or I think any good editor, actually looks at every single take and every single frame.
so it's a lot to go through. He shoots with a lot of cameras, and they're all pretty elaborately choreographed sometimes. So it's not the kind of situation where it's necessarily immediately apparent how you would construct the scene, because he really creates so many variables. And I think, one of the things that helped with that is as far as I know, Ridley's one of the few directors who still watches dailies every day. So he would, almost every day after shooting, come back to the cutting room, we'd watch all the footage, and so he would kind of take me through everything they were thinking when they were shooting and what the intention was and what they ended up liking or not. And so that helped a lot get through the amount of material.
We do cut in 3D in the entire process. The movie's shot in 3D, and we watch in 3D dailies. The editor cuts in 3D, and Ridley will only watch it in 3D. He does not like to watch it. There's no transition. Other people don't. Some people shoot natively in 3D, and they don't want to watch it. It bothers them, but we do everything in 3D.
I think, in loose terms, we see 3D. You've got two cameras, they're side by side, so they're doing that. So you're getting a three-dimensional thing anyway. I think the brain is so conditioned to assuming that you see 3D that it's no longer spectacular. So I think when you do the 3D cameras, you're being reminded of how you see it. Enhances even the most intimate moments. Doesn't have to be spears being thrown at camera and all that. I don't do that. I mean, if it happens, yeah, it's useful, but 3D was always done for that reason before. But now it's just another experience.
198 whiskey, take 4A.
Because it was shot in 3D and because I was cutting in 3D, it wasn't something I had to go back and fix. I was always watching it that way anyway to begin with.
You cut it, you can cut quicker today because you've got, if you've got the right script and you've shot it well and you've done it properly, it's all working, and you get a length, you're too long.
The first assembly on this film, when we finished shooting, it was over 4.5 hours. It's rough and it's long and it's repetitive and it's interesting, but you would never release it in a theater.
So you gradually slave it down to 3 hours, and the thing is still, I think, a bit long. It was running really well at 3 hours, but I figured you can't really run 3 hours, you've got to get it down. Hey.
There's a point at which Moses comes back from Midian, and he comes back to Egypt. You're sort of ready to see what's going to happen between him and Ramses. And there was a lot of back and forth there with, there was a whole snake hunt.
Sorry, cut it. Let's go again.
Right, all of you at once. There you go.
And building the army, and Moses gave a few different speeches about we got to capture him. No, never mind. We got to turn the people against him. And there were discussions about strategy and all this kind of stuff. And I felt in the script that you're kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop. And that is an area where we ended up lifting a lot of sequences, but it's not the only area. There were other things that in the script seemed totally necessary, but when it was shot, we were able to remove because it became obvious that it was redundant or, just in some way blocked the story and we didn't need it.
Not very comfortable in it.
It would be. This film works on an emotional level. Considering it's an epic. Surprisingly, the epic scale of it didn't crush the emotional intentions within the story. So I'm very happy about that, and I'm protecting that, absolute protection on that, and seeing how far dare I go before I start to intrude on that, because it's powerful.
A lot of the scenes that we initially removed were in the, I'd say in the front third of the film, because there's a lot of scenes of people talking in the palace, and we didn't want to have 2 hours of that before the film even got going.
Child?
I have endured worse than this.
Oh, it's not about you. It's about me.
Then you're going to have to start working on performances, and that's where you've got to be really careful, and you've got to protect the performance of what you've got. And so if the scene is 4 minutes and should be 2 minutes, you've got to watch you don't destroy that scene by removing 2 minutes and then wondering why it doesn't work so well.
Appointing him won't keep me from telling you what I think.
Ridley and I discussed whether there was any purpose in putting out an extended cut, and we went through the list of scenes, and there really was a good reason for everything that we removed, and there was nothing that we were just wishing was still in there. The theatrical cut of the film is the version of the film that Ridley wants everybody to see. It's, you know, everything that was taken out for a reason, and the version that we ended up with in theaters is the version that we feel is, you know, and Ridley feels is the best version of the film.
Films don't get done like this any longer, you know, rather than it being 50% practical and 50% visual effects. You know, we're very much up there at 85%. We filmed it for real in camera.
This is not his family.
Trying to, you know, excite the audience with the majesty and the grandeur of what ancient Egypt was, and the suffering and the deprivation of what the Hebrew captivity was.
Religion is particularly delicate matter, and it's really difficult, tricky juggling act to honor or be respectful of the actual origins, the story.
Belief or not belief, you know, pursuit of something, or people's hunger for freedom. We see this over and over again. I mean, we see it every day. I mean, it's right in our faces now, more than ever.
Yes!
And because it's a common, shared, constant question, New or Old Testament, whatever religion, denomination you are, or not, there's always that debate, discussion.
All I can hope for is that our interpretation actually creates some conversation, creates some debate, you know. It obviously is entertaining, first and foremost, but then also brings up some questions.
To know that I'm a part of a film, which is something really dear to me, which is you're me and I'm you, and that everybody should be treated equally. Whether it's a religious thing for some people, or whether it's just an ideological and philosophical exploration of a truth of human nature, it's important. I do hope that resonates very strongly.